Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ted Gardner, and I am an interviewer for the Library of Congress Oral History Project, which is so capably handled here in our public library. And we have the honor and the pleasure of talking with Dr. Taylor Asbury here this morning of Cincinnati, a prominent physician for many years. And Dennis Daly is our videographer here. And you're going to get a DVD of this, Tuck, and I'll refer to you that way because we've known each other for so long.
Oh, I hope so.
Tuck Asbury, what a great name. But anyway, where were you born, Tuck?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
I haven't progressed much in 83 years.
And where did you start out in school, elementary?
Lots Beach.
Okay.
Just after Mrs. Lots Beach moved from her open air school in Clifton, where she had no heating, if you can imagine that. But she moved to Red Bank Road and founded, or continued, a really great school.
Really great.
So I was there in the early years.
And you went through high school there, did you?
No, I don't know whether it was me or my parents, but I went to Lots Beach through the second grade. I went to the Hyde Park Public School, third and fourth, which virtually has destroyed my education. And then then I went to Country Day School for the fifth through the ninth grade, and managed to catch up without losing a year. It very nearly put me back a year. And then I went to Andover Prep School for 3 years before, and that was, I was the class of 43, which of course the war was on, and I got into was accepted in the V12 program at Yale after that.
Well, we're going to get into that, but
Okay.
I want to go back just a little bit because your family, a very prominent and very interesting family. Right. And your father, of course, and your siblings and so forth. Tell us about your childhood, your growing up days, things that you did and interests that you developed and so forth.
Well, I certainly had a privileged childhood in the sense that we certainly weren't wanting in any way. I think it was fairly normal. My father was a very, very energetic person, and he not only did medicine, but he eventually got into thoroughbred horse racing, and but he also was a family man, and baseball was perhaps his passion, and it, I guess, became my passion as time went on. So those were certainly very prominent. My mother was also a physician, and which was unusual in those days, to say the least. But it was medicine was not jammed down my throat by any means. In fact, it was virtually never mentioned, although there was an unmistakable aura that I would be successful perhaps if I became a physician, and maybe not if I did anything else. Well, my brother was much the same, and he also became a physician and neurologist.
Right. Going away to school, leaving home and going to a prep school in the East, how did that work with you?
You know, that's a very interesting question. I think any well-adjusted person would not really want to do that. We had a great experience at Country Day School. However, in those days, everybody went to prep school, or I say virtually. We had a class of 20 in the 9th grade, and by the 10th grade or 11th grade, there were only 2 or 3 that were left. So you were virtually forced to do it. And while the idea going in didn't seem very good, I really enjoyed my 3 years at Andover. It was a tremendous experience. It's not, I must say, I don't think it's for every kid, but for probably 75% of students, it's a very, very good experience.
Well, you certainly were exposed to a fine education and teachers
and confreres. George Bush, George Herman Walker Bush, was one class ahead of me at Andover, and
you knew him there?
well, we played on 5 varsity teams together, so I knew him pretty well.
I should say. That's outstanding. I didn't realize that.
Well.
Of course. And of course, you were fairly near Boston.
Yeah, about 35 miles.
Yeah, and the cultural center, and lots of advantages there to go into the city.
Yes, and Andover, of all schools, Andover and Exeter, which were very much alike, were very lenient on, much more lenient than almost any other prep school, in allowing you to go on weekends. Yes, you had to, you were supposed to be under the custody of some responsible person. But if you broke the rules at Andover, they were not tolerant at all of misbehavior. And I would say in my period, there was probably 275 students in my class at one time or another, of which less than 200 graduated. In other words, there was a big attrition. Many of those students were out for relatively mild infractions, went to another school and did very well. But Andover was tough disciplinarians in that sense.
So after Andover, then where did you go?
Well, I was very fortunate. The war was on. I had decided on medicine. I had actually been accepted at Yale as a civilian, but the V-12 program came along, and many of us enrolled in that or were able to get in that, and I was happened to be sent to Yale. Yale had a large V-12 contingent and a particularly active pre-medical course. Right. And really, we led a pretty close to normal college life. We were in a GOBS uniform. We did do some marching around the streets and this and that, but we also could join a fraternity, play varsity athletics, and of course do the academics that one would expect.
What was your favorite sport?
Well, baseball. I was fairly proficient at baseball. I was captain of the Yale team, and went on to play professional baseball for a year or so after that. But I play soccer was also a favorite, which wasn't in those days very as popular. George Bush was the captain both at Andover and Yale of, well, both soccer and baseball. But soccer was his sport that is not known very much. I've never seen it referred to, but that was his best sport. He would have been, had they had all Americans in those days in soccer, he would definitely have been one.
Yeah. And of course he was a tall man.
He was 6'4" or so.
Yeah.
Tall and slender. Surprisingly didn't play hockey. Everybody he grew up in Connecticut, and athletes all played hockey, but he didn't. And he hadn't played basketball either, and he came out for basketball as manager, pick up the towels type of thing. And the coach looked at him and he says, Bush, you're taller than anybody on the team. And you're an athlete. And he wound up, he never became a great basketball player, but he played.
Right. Through the years, have you kept in touch with the former president?
Well, I did for quite a while. He was not, I wouldn't say we were close friends. We had our differences, although I admired him and still do admire him a great deal for giving giving up his life for public service, which is really, what he did. And I have a great, I didn't agree with everything that he did,
right.
but nor his son, I might say.
I understand.
But nevertheless, yes, we kept in touch, and especially when his political career got going and he came here. I was a member of the Commonwealth Club, and introduced him once, and and so yes, we certainly stayed in touch.
Well, that's something that you can cherish forever. I can understand that. Yeah. Going back to your college days, did you enjoy your midshipman training in the V-12?
Yes, I did, but there wasn't a whole lot of midshipman training to it. As I say, we drilled, I think, an hour a week. We did have to get up every morning and run around the streets of New Haven, beginning at about 6 o'clock for 20 minutes or so. I enjoyed it because it was really more like college life. We had more restrictions. We weren't allowed out as much in the evening, but the weekends were pretty free.
Right.
But we could join a fraternity, play varsity sports. It was. I think what was interesting, the commander of it, the Navy commander, who was a reserve officer, had been a headmaster at a prep school.
Oh.
And he tried, and he said, "I'm trying to make this as much like college as I can. We'll do the military stuff as we need to." And I think that was a very good judgment.
Yes, I should say.
The V-12 program, I don't think mattered a whole lot as it turned out, but had the war been longer, it really would have, we would have had people coming out, and certainly our belligerents wouldn't have. I mean, we would have been much better in the long run.
Right.
As it turned out, the war was shorter, I think, than probably was anticipated, or anyway, whatever.
Well, were you being trained to be a deck officer?
Not at all.
Not at
no,
all.
I was trained to be a physician.
I see. Physician training all the
Yeah.
way through.
But to be commissioned,
Sure.
had the war gone on, I would have been commissioned a naval medical officer.
Yeah.
As it is, I only just barely got to medical school by the time the war was over.
I see. Well, those were interesting days,
Yeah.
I should say. My goodness. After you're getting your commission and getting into your, then did you go right to medical school?
The Navy sent me to medical school in the fall of 1945. The war was winding down. We'd already defeated Germany, and Japan was in the atomic bombs, of course, and I guess it was August of 45. But I had already been assigned, and their policy was to send you as near home as possible. I wanted to go to an Eastern school, of course,
Sure.
by that point. But I was sent to Cincinnati, and which turned out to be very, very good. And you could live at home and so forth. And we were all mustered out by early 1946. So I had just started medical school when the war was over. I did graduate, and then Korea came along,
Right.
and I was in the Naval Reserve, and was called to duty
You were
at
picked
that
up for
as
that.
a.
Well, tell us about that.
Well, I was.
service.
I'll never forget. I was ending my internship. That was in June of 1950, and when suddenly Korea erupted. I was going on for training in ophthalmology. I'd already arranged for that. But the draft board, I was single, 26, and my name started with A. So I must have been.
Top of the list.
I must have been. And I'll never forget reporting to the draft board. And this union guy was there, and he said, "Oh, we're sending you to, basic training." That meant as a an enlisted man, and I would have no reference to the fact that I was a physician.
Of course.
I said, well, what about this? He said, well, they'll catch up with you. After a couple of months, you'll probably get commissioned, he says. Well, I was able to that's when I was able to get into the Navy and,
Sure.
Activate my reserve status. And
Were you commissioned as a lieutenant?
as a lieutenant JG,
Yeah.
which was the lowest rank a medical officer could have. There were
I
no ensign. They didn't have ensigns.
Right.
And I was sent to Great Lakes, where I spent about 4 months, there were some basic things there, although I was assigned to an eye, ear, nose, and throat facility because I expressed interest. I had no training in eye, but and then I was sent to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. This was about April, I guess, of 1951. And I spent the rest of my 2 years there. I was with a tank battalion.
Wow.
I probably had
Marines, huh?
I was assigned to the Marines with, of course, the naval officers and naval physicians were assigned to the Marines. I had about a 90% chance, I guess, of going to Korea, but somehow hit the 10% that didn't go. Stayed with this tank battalion.
How did you like being with the Marines?
Well, I liked it. Of course, it was pretty easy going away from. I had sick call in the morning, and by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I didn't have much to do as far as I checked with the colonel, head of the battalion, and I'd go shoot skeet, play golf, and eventually coached the battalion baseball team.
Good for you.
He was very interested in that. In fact, he even played on the team, although he was well into his 30s. But so, I'd like to say I had great hardship and great sacrifice in a certain way, but it just wasn't that way.
Well, but it was all such an enriching and building time for you as a young man.
Well, it was. Of course, it was a wasted, as it turned out. I wasted about 3 years, what with the timing. By the time I got back into training,
As far as the
it
medical
was,
career is
it was July of 53. So I actually lost 3 years. I don't begrudge it. I mean, that's the way it was. And I started my residency in ophthalmology at the University of California, San Francisco.
Oh, you did? Oh.
And that was a 3-year program at the time, still one of the best programs.
Now, did you practice out there in California?
Well, I trained. I mean, I was learning. I was in residency.
Did you live there?
Well, nobody could believe that they'd say, where are you going to be? Where are you going to practice in California? They said, I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to stay here or go back to Cincinnati. And nobody could believe that I would leave California to come back to Cincinnati. But, of course, that's what I eventually did. There was a lot of, by that time, the farm and the horse operation was really in full progress. And my dad didn't, as he never did, tell me what to do or say you should do it or even suggest something.
Was he practicing medicine at that time?
You talk about practicing. He worked at medicine 6.5 days a week and a half a day a week at the horse thing.
Oh,
And he was,
what a guy.
he really was. And
I have his book.
yeah, he's got several books. They're all alike, though,
Yeah.
anecdotal,
I
autobiographical.
should say. So warm and so.
Well, he knew
know.
the people. He had a feel for the people. He got around.
He was a native Kentuckian, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was from Kentucky, and a lot of Kentuckiana in there.
And your mother too?
No, she was from here. Her father was a general practitioner in Madisonville and leading citizen out there. He had 2 daughters. My mother was the oldest of the 2. This was in 1917. He was all for everybody doing what he called the world's work. In other words, women, they shouldn't just be at home doing raising kids. And he actually, when they were about 18 or 19, he bought them a car. He said, you're going to the University of Cincinnati. You need to get, you don't go on the streetcar. He bought him a car. Now that was really, wow. You talk about ahead of the time.
Yeah.
And he was not a wealthy man. He probably made $10,000 a year or something like that in medicine. But that was the way he brought up his daughters,
really,
and I think
forward thinker.
Well, he was, and he was a rather. He wasn't one of these autocrats, or I mean, he was a very compassionate man. I remember him very well. I was 11 when he died. So I'm 5th generation physician on my mother's side, and 3rd on my father's side.
Goodness sake, what a tradition. That's just outstanding. Well now, how did you feel about the horse business? Did you enjoy that?
Well, unfortunately, I got very, very hooked myself. Yeah, that was an interesting. My dad, who he did taper off some in medicine, and probably did do more in the horse world. He was unbelievably successful. I mean, he bred a Derby winner fairly early. He got in the jockey club, which no Midwesterner, let alone, I mean, a Kentuckian, or let alone a commercial horse breeder, which is really what he was, got in the jockey club. They were all the Wideners and the Vanderbilts and et cetera of the East Coast. But he made such an impression, I guess. He wrote in the journals and the horse journals, et cetera, et cetera. And so, but by I'll never forget, we were at a horse sale in 1972 at Keeneland. And I'm trying to help him a little bit, sell horses, and it was the yearly crop. And he suddenly turned to me and he said, "Tuck, I'm 77. It's time for me. You take over. Yeah, I want you to take over." Well, first of all, I didn't believe him. And secondly, I wasn't sure that's what I really wanted to do. Along with, of course, running the eye department out here and having a practice. Yeah. Sure. So that'd give me 3 jobs. And but anyway, he did mean it, and so I did run the thing for about 20 years. And my brother always said, "You're doing too much. I mean, you're dividing yourself too much," and he was probably right. But anyway, yes, I was very interested. I formed a lot of partnerships. I was more interested in racing than my dad was. He was more interested in breeding. And I figured out the other day, I was adding up some things. I had 134 partners before it was over.
Good heavens.
You would know about 100 of them. And I didn't take anybody that I didn't think I would have any trouble getting along with.
Right, I should say.
And I only had 1 or 2 situations that weren't perfect. We didn't breed any Derby winners, but we had fun, and so that was the deal. But just to complete the story, about 1990, it became obvious no one in the family was going to take over for me, and it's a family business, and there was no other alternative. We dispersed. It was a kind of a thankless job for me. I mean, and you're dealing with, in this case, 12 grandchildren of my parents, about 9 of whom lived as far away as Tucson and places that, and they had no interest in it, and yet they did have a financial stake. And you can, I've seen so many families get in problems with that sort of thing.
Yeah, it can be very, very difficult.
So we beat him to the draw. We beat him to the punch a little bit, and dispersed
Before he got in deep trouble.
That's right. Before they shot me.
Right. How about your brother? Did you ever?
Well, he's a great guy. You don't know Arthur, probably.
No,
He's the smart Asbury. He's actually he's a world-class neurologist, and I mean, anybody in that field would, you say, name the top 5 in the world, and he'd likely be on the list. He went completely academic. He had a number of positions, wound up as professor of neurology at the University of Pennsylvania, where he still is at age 79, working about 60 hours a week in neurology. He was very interested in the farm, and in his early career, actually was there a year. Do you remember his first wife was Patty Armstrong? I don't know if you ever knew Patty, but they were married for about 20 years. They had 3 kids, and in his early career, he thought that was going to be what he did. But as time went on, he got into medicine and was very successful.
Well, that's it's your pattern of life through your childhood and your education and your Navy experience and your war experience and your dedication to humanity has been outstanding, and I'm sure that people that you've touched over the years has meant a lot to you. Do you keep in touch with fellas that you were in the service with, or?
Not so much the service. I will say that, considering I am 83, for instance, as recently as last night, Connie and I gave a party that had a purpose. We usually have a purpose when we give a party. And the purpose was I've been trying to help, and I think I have helped, the relatively new dean of the medical school. I met him very early on when he came, and he expressed an interest in getting to know people in Cincinnati. Well, I've heard that before, and usually it doesn't mean much. I mean, they don't follow through. And in his case, I said, okay, and we gave a party then, and he met some of the people that you wouldn't have met that quickly otherwise. And so I'm still actually on the payroll of the university as a kind of I don't know what, PR guy, and certainly an advisor and helper for David Stern, who's doing, I think, a very good job there.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, your position in the community, of course, and having been here most of your life, means a lot. And you said something earlier about people in California wondering why you'd want to go back to Cincinnati. Yeah. People far away don't understand Cincinnati if they've never lived here.
Well, I think that's right, and I know that's right. And you do. It's not just the native Cincinnatians.
Right.
You have a lot of people, and I could name a number that have come here either through Procter & Gamble or some business thing usually, and they say, "Well, this is the best. I've lived here, there, here, and here, but this is the best place I ever lived. Bring up kids, meet people, whatever it was." Absolutely. I think that's right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you've established yourself in the community over the years so well, and your support, particularly of the university and the medical school here, and this has meant a lot to our community. And do you have any funny stories about your, for example, being in that tank battalion with the Marines there at Lejeune? There must have been some funny experiences. Anything come to mind that you'd like people to know about?
Oh, gosh. I'm sure there were.
Now, Camp Lejeune, that was a big camp, wasn't
Camp
it?
Lejeune was big. This involved, you knew my ex-brother-in-law, Jimmy Stone.
Sure.
Well, yeah, and that comes to mind. He was, at the time, he was at Camp Lejeune. He's assigned to the Marines. And he was actually, you might not believe this or have thought of it, but he was a gung-ho Marine. Now, would you think that of Jimmy Stone?
No, absolutely.
No, I don't think anybody would.
And I don't remember his ever really bragging about it.
No, and it's funny, he didn't.
Yeah.
He would brag about some things, but no, but anyway, Jimmy, he was pretty well connected. His father was possibly in his time, certainly one of the most respected people on Wall Street. Asiel and Company was the company. It was an old firm, very conservative, very reliable. And Jake Stone, name had been changed from Stein, I believe. Mm-hmm. And Jake was a wonderful person. And through that, if Jewish people had a, what do you call it, not adopt son, where you're I'm at a loss for a word here.
Conversion?
What?
Conversion?
No, well, anyway, it doesn't matter, the word escapes me, but he was a protege, let's say, of Bobby Lehman. Mm. Unfortunately, he had the Lehman Brothers, and that's the kind of connections he had. But Lehman wanted him desperately. Well, I don't know about that, but he was after Jimmy to come into the Lehman Brothers. And Jimmy didn't he wanted to get away from New York. He wanted to get away from anti-Semitism as much as possible. He ran into anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. He couldn't get in a club, this or that. And so, but he knew these people. And he came, his great friend was Pete Geyer. Mm-hmm. They were roommates at Deerfield and Williams in the same class, graduated. Williams, the Stones had, and Jake Stone, Jimmy's father, was chairman of the board at Williams. Mm. And I'm sure they gave a lot of money over the years to Williams. But, so anyway, we're at Camp Lejeune. Here's Jimmy. He's now commissioned in the Korean War. He was in a tank battalion, but it was another tank battalion. And let's go back a minute. Have we got time for?
Oh yeah, we got plenty of
time. All right.
Time.
Well, this might be worth telling. I first met Jimmy when he came out to Pete Geyer's wedding to Peggy Bullock at that time, 1947. Mm-hmm. And at the bachelor dinner, that was the first time I met Jimmy, and it's the only time I ever saw him drunk. He was always under control, and he was not a drinker, but he kind of got loose that night. He was about 19 years old, and I'll never forget, during the evening, he said, "How long has this been going on?" He says, "Cincinnati, my God." He says, "I'm going to marry a Cincinnati girl." God, what he said. He'd never been here before. He did know Pete Geyer. Well, not much happened for a while. That was 47. He did court Patty Armstrong, who eventually married my brother. And she didn't really like Jimmy very much. Anyway, that didn't go very far. But later, he met Lib. And he was still at Camp Lejeune, and he knew me. And the way he courted her, he sent her orchids, I don't know how, twice a week. And must have, flew up to, hired a plane. He had plenty of money then. He'd already inherited money from his father. And he would fly up for the weekend. Well, Liv was a great gal, but at that time, a little bit of a wallflower, and certainly not, she'd had her suitors, I guess, but not much. And this guy was overwhelming.
Swept her off her feet.
Of course, I advised her not to marry him. It was a great, which strained our relationship for a while. I should never have done that. But anyway, they were married. But one time we were there at Lejeune, and the commandant of the Marine Corps came down, and he hadn't been there very long when he asked the head guy at the colonel, or it must have been a general of Lejeune, he says, "I want to see Jimmy Stone." And the guy says, "Who the hell is Jimmy Stone?" Well, of course, they rustled around. They finally found Jimmy Stone. So he is brought up ceremoniously to say hello to the commandant of the Marine Corps.
Good heavens.
who knew Jake Stone.
Sure.
And very well. And
What a
things like that would happen. Another thing, this is pretty good too. His tank battalion went to, remember Vieques, where the island where they had gotten. They attacked the mainland of the United States, and our battalion they were attacking our battalion in a war game. And Stone pulls some kind of a deal and captures the commander of our battalion. I mean, it was a coup, of some sort of a coup that he could pull off. Well, his commander was so, pleased with it. He gets real high marks. They capture the ops. And so you know what he did? Stone had 4 months to go in the service at the time. So his boss says, "Okay, I'm detaching you for the rest of your time here. I'm assigning you 2 yeomen, and you're in that building over there." And that was
Get him out of the way.
Well, get him out of the way, but to reward him for this great thing.
How about that?
Jimmy, I mean, he would pull stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I remember Jimmy very well, and he is that kind of a guy. He could really stir things up. Well, now, in the tank battalion, did you learn about the equipment itself?
I really didn't. We didn't have any tanks. We were short of tanks.
Oh.
Well, they were all in Korea.
Yeah, of course.
And even in the war games, I think they did finally get a couple of tanks, but not many. And the medical officers were not primary for learning how to operate a tank or whatever it was. I had very little, even there, I just seemed to hit it where, I could have been in Korea, but there I was. And Connie, we had just been married. We had been married less than a year, and we got, at first the housing wasn't so good, but as we were there and moved up the ladder for housing, we wound up in the last 6 or 8 months with a beautiful house right on the base.
Wow.
So the living was pretty good.
Not bad at all. You were in San Francisco for what, 3 years?
3 years, yeah.
How'd you like living out
Well, that was a great experience.
Wasn't
It's a
that
great
something?
town.
Beautiful city.
A beautiful city. And I think then it was before all the stuff that's going on now. And so it really was. There was a lot to do. Frankly, I played quite a bit of golf. There was a young staff man that was a kind of a golf nut. He'd been out for 2 or 3 years from the program, but we got together and struck quite a friendship, which lasted the rest of his life until a couple of years ago. Wow. So he was my mentor in ophthalmology and in golf. He was the one that stimulated me to really work at it. So there was it was good for Connie too. We had three daughters under age 3.
Wow.
So she was pretty busy, and but she was a good mother, to say the least.
Well, I should say she's.
But we did enjoy the city, and had I not had such, I gave some thought to staying out there, not really much, because I think if it hadn't been for the farm,
right.
And my interest by that time already, my interest in racing. We just had the Derby winner. That happened while I was in
What was the name of that horse?
Determined.
Oh, Determined.
1954.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, he was quite a horse, and not long after that, Dad got in the jockey club. I mean, we were really into the racing scene, and I did it. I mean, I have to admit, I enjoyed that a lot.
How about your baseball career? Tell us about that.
Well, I love baseball, and I had a certain amount of ability. I played at Andover 3 years.
What position did you play?
I played third base and shortstop. And then at Yale, Red Rolfe.
Oh my gosh.
Red Rolfe was the coach. He was my idol.
Yeah.
He was. We both had red hair. We both played third base. We both threw right-handed and bat left-handed. And he went to Exeter and Dartmouth and graduated. That was really unusual. He then was signed to the New York Yankees and played at Newark 1 year, and then the Yankees for 9 years, where he was, in his time, he was certainly an all-star. He was even on some lists as all-time third baseman. I don't think he was really that good, but he was very good. And I'll never forget the first day I went out for the Yale team, and he was there and talked to the group, and he said, "I'm going to treat you guys just as if you were big leaguers. I'm going to coach this team like Joe McCarthy managed us in the New York Yankees." And he did do that, and it was really added a lot. I mean, he really learned baseball. He was a smart guy, a sensitive guy. I couldn't have had a better college coach.
What a great experience. You know, of course, Wade Hoyt was older, but Wade Hoyt thought a lot of Red Rolfe.
Did he?
Oh, yes.
I didn't know that.
I got to know Wade fairly well.
He's a great guy.
Oh, great.
Wonderful,
guy.
Great
and,
guy.
And of course he was such a dedicated Yankee, you know, through and through and through.
Well, he loved Root.
Oh boy.
That's what, I say Root. That's what the owner, Jacob Rupert, who was a foreigner and had that accent, he called him Root. He said, when he pitched a game one time, and he says, "Root, I don't know how good a pitcher you are. You only win 2-1. He says, "I got pitchers who win games 10-1.
Well, Wade always told that wonderful story about going to Babe's funeral. Do you know that story?
I don't think I do.
Quick thing. It was a very, very hot day in Baltimore, it was boiling.
Yeah, he was
And Wade, of course, could tell the story. You know, he would laugh, and he was so colorful and such a wonderful guy and great heart. And he said we were standing outside the church after the ceremony, and it was a hot day. And he said, I turned to somebody. I don't know if it was Yogi Berra or not, but it might have been Yogi. And Wade said, well, what did you think about it all? And whoever it was responded by saying, well, I know that the babe would have said, give me a cold beer.
There's a great story when he was playing in Brooklyn, away at the end of his career, and he was hit with a line drive, I think. Anyway, he was injured, and he was on the ground. And he says, the announcer says, hurt is Hoyt. And he always thought that was the funniest. Just, you talk about a Brooklyn accent.
Oh, boy.
Hurt is Hoyt.
Oh my gosh! Well, you know that's a great story about your friendship with Red Rolfe and your experience with him. Now, you said you played some professional ball.
Yes. Well, I went from there to medical school at Cincinnati, and I had heard, I don't remember, a guy named Hal Schneider. Hal Schneider played both football and basketball for UC in medical school.
No kidding.
Well, the thing is, the rules were very, let's say, flexible. And I remembered that. This was a year or two before. And so I got the idea, I'd love to play baseball. So I'm in medical school. So I said, what the hell, I'll go out for the team. Well, as it turned out, I played 3 years at UC. I'd already played at Yale. I'll never forget the coach was Ray Nolding. Mm-hmm. Nolding, who could care less about baseball. He was football, and they had spring practice, and he wasn't even hardly there. But the first day, I came up to him and I said, Mr. Nolding, I want you to know that I played, and he said, I didn't hear anything. He said, what'd you say? No, I didn't hear anything. He didn't want to hear that. And a friend of mine who had played professional baseball already did the same thing happened. He came up and he said, I think I ought to tell you. And as soon as he got about that part, I can't hear anything. He said, no. So that's the way Nolding. So I played 3 years. Well, remember Shevlin's restaurant? Yeah, Jimmy Shevlin, maybe you don't remember, right here in town. Shevlin he played at Holy Cross in college, and then he played for the Reds, and he was not bad. He was, played 5 or 6 years. And Jimmy had his problems, but was trying to run the restaurant. His father was a great restaurateur. Well, anyway, Jimmy came out as a kind of a volunteer coach for the team. We got quite friendly, and so I said, I had said to him a couple of times, I said, I wouldn't mind trying to play professional ball 1 year sometime. I'm in medical school. I'm not going to be a ball player. Stan Musial was making $25,000, and most of them were making $7,000, and it was before television. So, well, Jimmy says, I know Billy Southworth, manager of the Boston Braves, and I'll see what we can do. Well, what happened was that after I was through 3 years of medical school by this time, and he said, I've arranged at the end of that spring period, I've arranged for you to join the Boston Braves for a tryout, and you'll travel with the team for as long as Billy Southworth wants you to be there or whatever. So you're supposed to meet him in Pittsburgh, which was about a week away. So I was with, you talk about having a cup of coffee. Well, that's about what it was. I was with him 10 days. working out, batting practice, everything.
Did you get
that
to
was
travel with
spawn and sane and pray for rain. That was the year.
Yeah.
1948, they won the pennant.
Right.
Eddie Stanky was the second baseman,
Oh
and
my gosh.
he was the leader of
You
it.
knew all those guys.
Well, I knew him then.
Yeah.
And it was a great experience. I mean, it's something I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when we went from Pittsburgh to Chicago to St. Louis, and took batting practice and so forth and everything. I wasn't on the roster. I couldn't even stay in the dugout during the game. But we got back here, and my arm wasn't too great then. It was somewhat sore. And he said, "Kid, I want you to get out there in center field with Bill Russell. And I want you to throw, second, third, and home." I threw the ball to third base. It came in there on about 3 or 4 bounces, and and so he hadn't paid a lot of attention to me. In batting practice, I think I looked pretty good. I batted left hand. I had some out of the park, and I looked pretty good, I guess. So he calls me over after this, and he says, you speak as if perhaps you have some education. And he said, "What do you plan to do in life?" This Southworth, I don't know if you remember him. He was a pretty good guy. He'd been around the Cardinals and the Braves for about 15 years as manager.
Played for the Gas House Gang?
Yeah, well, Frankie Frisch managed the Gas House Gang, but Southworth was around. Anyway, so I said, "Well, I'm not gonna tell you any fibs here. I'm through three years of medical school, and I want to play this summer in baseball, but I probably want to be a doctor." He says, "Kid," he says, "you better get back there to medical school," he says, "and forget about baseball." That's what he said. I said, "Well," but
there was a man who could perceive.
And I went over, so I knew the Reds organization. My dad did too. Pal Crosley was actually quite a close friend. Was married at our farm, actually, his second wife. And so Freddie Flagg was the guy. He was the head of the farm system. I went over and talked to him. I just said, "I want to play a year. This summer." Well, he put me on a good team, Sunbury, Pennsylvania. It was a pretty good league. And I'll tell you what, it was different playing in college. I could hold my own. I was 23 by then, which if Rolf told me when I was 19, he said, "You are a lot like me." He said, "You got a little more power. I could run better." And he kind of compared us. And he said, "I think you'd have some sort of chance." But I was in the service then, and I mean, there was no way out of that.
Right.
So anyway, I did have a nice summer at it, and got it out of my system.
Well, Chuck, it's just great to hear your life story, and a privilege for me to have known you for many years and have known some of your family as well. We're looking at something here that's very, very important, and you have submitted yourself, kind of opened yourself up very, very generously. And I know that your family and your friends who see this DVD are going to be very, very happy, maybe surprised in some ways. But a copy of it's going to be kept here at the archives.
That's right.
At the library, and a copy will be sent to the Library of Congress in Washington in the archives. And you're going to be on the web, so you're exposed for the forever from this interview, but it's been just such a great experience. Do you have anything else that comes to mind? We got a couple of minutes left. If you got any other funny story, anything particular about your horse racing years? Did you come close in Derby and anything like that?
Well, we did have, yes. We had a very nice colt, a Buffalo Trace. And this was in the late 80s, 1988, I believe. Mm-hmm. And he was a very promising horse, and he was coming up to what used to be called the Jim Beam Stakes. It's the Spiral. It's been called a number of things. It's the now Turfway equivalent of a pre-Derby race, and in those days it was already a $500,000 race, which was a big purse. We had him in there. I probably had at least eight partners in this horse. He had cost quite a bit of money in the first place. He was well-bred and so forth. And he was, Randy Romero rode him, and Pat Day was also in the race on a horse called Western Playboy. Well, they came, our horse was probably 10-1, and Western Playboy was the favorite. They came to the last 16th of a mile. With one of them was going to win it, and well, Pat Day outrode Romero. I think that if the jockeys had been on the other horse, if they'd been on each other's horse, I believe that we would have won it. Of course, it was very close, and at that point we thought, well, maybe we got a Derby horse on our hands here. As it turned out, he tailed off in training some. He ran in the Bluegrass Stakes. He was probably a grass horse. We knew that, but I remember at Keeneland, the field came up light for the Bluegrass. There were only about 5 horses entered, and Western Playboy was in there as the favorite again. But he wasn't a dominant horse. He was just a nice horse.
Well, it must have been a very thrilling.
Well, it was, but unfortunately, he did not run well in the Bluegrass, and we really should have had him in a grass race, a stakes, and kept him there. And the trainer had said that, but the management of Keeneland had come to us and said, it'd be nice if you'd run in the Bluegrass. There's not many horses, maybe you'll have a chance to win it. And that could have been true, but it wasn't. There was a lot of stories like that. It's a heartbreak thing. Horses are fragile. Things happen to them. You've got to be prepared for the heartbreak if you're going to survive. And I've had partners that at the first adversarial kind of a thing or something would happen, they would bitch about it or this or that, and I told more than one of them, I said, you are not suited for the horse business.
Right. You've got to be tough and be able to handle adversary. Well, Dr. Taylor Asbury, this has been a great privilege to have the opportunity to speak with you, and I know that everyone's going to enjoy seeing you on the DVD. We want to thank you for your service, your great service to your community, and God bless.
Well, thank you, Ted. I appreciate it very much, and your understanding is outstanding, and I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.